Hello, everyone. We will get started shortly here. Just some quick housekeeping items, I suppose. There is a closed caption button available on your screen, so you're able to have that running as I'm speaking. And I know it says that this will be till 3:30. There's a solid chance we won't go that long, but that does give some time for questions and any feedback that you'd like to provide. So I'm going to get started here. I'm going to get rolling just in the interest of time. And I am so, so grateful that you took some time to spend with me on this Saturday. Happy holidays. I feel like even though there's no snow here in Edmonton, Alberta, I'm able to say that being December 2nd. And thank you again for spending a little bit of your time with me today to talk a little bit and learn a little bit about the resource that I created called Pass the Mic, Let's Talk About Racism. I created this on secondment at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, which is located in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I'll tell you a little bit about that in a moment. But I guess we'll get rolling here. There's so many great sessions that you can check out during this convention between yesterday and the 10th of December. So besides this one, please feel free to jump into other sessions, learn a little bit more. Each day is themed, and we'll have tons and tons for you to learn, for us to learn together. So I strongly encourage you to check out some other sessions between now and the 10th. I know I will be, and there's so much to see, so many great people to learn from here as well. This is the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and it's located in Winnipeg, Manitoba, like I mentioned. And I'm a teacher by trade here in Edmonton, Alberta, and have been since 2013. And I've taught between grades 3 and 6 for the 8 years that I was teaching. And then I had the opportunity to take on a secondment opportunity, which means I had the opportunity to leave my classroom to try something new for a little bit. And it took a little bit of persuading from a friend of mine, but eventually I put in an application, thought this might be kind of a cool job, and ultimately was the successful candidate. And so I had the opportunity to spend 2 years learning and working at this brilliant place. If you have not yet been to check it out, I would highly encourage you to take a trip to Winnipeg. I think of Winnipeg very fondly now, whereas prior to my secondment, I didn't think much of it at all, if I'm being completely frank. But now that I've had the opportunity to be in Winnipeg for a couple of years and learn everything there is to know about human rights education, it's become such a strong passion of mine and something that I bring into my job, my current job, which is the Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism Consultant for Edmonton Catholic School Division. So being able to marry these two worlds of mine, I think, has been the biggest blessing that's come out of this wonderful secondment opportunity. And like I said, if you've not had the opportunity to check it out, I strongly encourage you to do so. The museum is located on Treaty 1 territory, which is the crossroads of the Ojibwe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota peoples. The Red River Valley is also the birthplace of the Métis, and at the museum, it's acknowledged that the Inuit relatives to the north, that's what they call home, and all of the water that flows through the museum is sourced from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation. It's interesting because not every place in this country, unfortunately, has drinkable water. There are still reserves here in Alberta that have boil advisories, and people can't just turn on their tap and have that luxury to turn on the tap and drink the water that comes from it. So I think it's a beautiful thing that the museum acknowledges where the water comes from and that they are grateful for that as well. I myself am a first-generation Ghanaian Canadian woman, the daughter of immigrants from Ghana, which is located in West Africa. My family and we recognize that we are uninvited guests, and we live, teach, and learn on Treaty 6 territory, the homeland of the Métis Nation of Alberta Region 4. I also acknowledge the many diverse groups of Indigenous peoples whose land I live on, including the Inuit, whose ancestors have marked this territory for centuries, a place that has welcomed many peoples from around the world to make their home here. So, we'll get into Pass the Mic, Let's Talk About Racism. I'm so excited about this resource. It's something that I spent 2 years working on when I left the classroom. And the way that I thought about this was in correlation with something that I've also been able to do here in Alberta, which is co-found the Black Teachers Association. And I have thought a lot about how I, as a Black person, at the height of George Floyd's murder and all of the things that surrounded it, I was teaching sixth grade at that time and was having a really, really hard time talking about all of the events that led to that untimely ending of someone's life. And I thought about, as a Black woman, I am having a hard time talking about things like racism and microaggressions and stereotypes and all of those things surrounding what had happened. But what about my other counterparts? What about my colleagues who aren't Black? How are they talking about these things? And as I moved on to the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, I thought about how social media is so big with not just kids, with all of us. And kids are learning and seeing a lot of things online and bringing those things into our classroom. Some of it's language, some of it is actions, some of it is racial slurs. How do we talk about these things with our students and help them to be better citizens? So this resource was designed to support teachers on that journey. I have to say, this is not a one-stop shop, nor will this solve all the problems surrounding racism in our schools. But it's a way to begin the process and begin the conversation with students in a way that's not harmful or triggering. And it's a way to give teachers grace to be able to have these conversations and be okay to get it wrong. Because even as an EDIAR consultant, I can admit I get things wrong. And so the grace and knowing that I have the grace of my peers to get it wrong and learn from mistakes is something that I think we as educators all need. So in this whole process, I thought about people telling stories. The CMHR is a museum of stories, not stuff. You'll find some artifacts, but you'll find a lot of historical stories and context throughout the building. And so I wanted to be able to add to the stories in the building. And so Pass the Mic was titled Pass the Mic because I want to give the microphone to people to tell their own stories. I could very easily just record myself talking about these three individuals that I had the chance to talk to, but I think it means more coming from the people themselves. And so Pass the Mic is an ode to giving people the ability to talk about themselves and talk about their own journeys without having it dictated or changed in a way that waters down some of the issues that we see. In this process, I had the ability to speak to these three brilliant Canadians, people that I call friends and people that I'm just so honored to be able to talk to on a regular basis. The first person that I had the ability to talk to is an Olympic athlete named Dawn Richardson Wilson, and she resides currently in Calgary, Alberta, but her home is Edmonton, Alberta. And I'll tell you a little bit about her and the other two in interviews that I was able to do in a moment. The third one is probably the most recognizable. His name's Gurdeep Pandher. If you've not heard of him, he's a dancer and a content creator in the Yukon. And Gurdeep is just as kind and warm as his videos portray him to be. That's not an act. He truly is a very warm soul and someone who his main focus is to spread joy and positivity. And he does so through dance. And he does so through beautiful content that he posts online about all of these beautiful untouched places in our country, some untouched, some not, but a lot of the time it is untouched regions that he's spending time in reflecting, meditating, dancing, praying, and learning on. So I had a ball being able to connect with Gurdeep Pandher. Last but not least, this is Dimitri Nanakote, or you might recognize this person as Kiara. They are a drag artist, and they were on the first season of Canada's Drag Race, which aired on CTV. I myself am a big Drag Race fan and all of its iterations, so I had a bit of a fangirl moment talking to Kiara, but it was a pleasure to get to know them beyond the grandeur of TV and get to know them as a person and what their journey was like coming into themselves and finding out that drag was who they were and what, not just what they did, but a part of who they are and all of the things that make them up as a person. If I start with Dawn, Dawn is a, a Canadian bobsled icon. She, like I said, is from Edmonton, Alberta, currently resides in Calgary and is going to university there. So, yes, she's still very young. She's going to university. She was born in Ghana, which is where my family is from. So, that was one reason I was excited to talk to her. But learning about her story was really important to me. She unfortunately has lost her parents and was adopted by one of her siblings from a very young age, and was adopted so that she could reside in Canada and begin a better life for herself. So she's someone who unfortunately doesn't have her birth parents any longer, but has people that care for her and love her, and they are still blood related to her. So she has that lineage within. She's always been involved in sports and athletics. She's always been an athlete, someone that values a good workout, a good sweat sesh. She's someone that spends her time actively and ended up beginning in the World Cup as a broke woman in 2021 and was able to make the Canadian bobsled team, which is quite a feat for someone her age to be able to say she's already been to the Olympic Games, she's already competed in them, and she spent a lot of time training. And of course, due to the pandemic, things had to be put on hold. But to be able to be a celebrated, cherished Canadian athlete, someone who wears a maple leaf quite proudly, is quite an honor for her. Despite being such a boisterous, when you see her on social media, see her on TV at the Olympics competing in a sport, she's very loud, she's very boisterous. But the conversation we had, she was very muted, very shy, and it took a lot to get out her story. But once we started digging into her story, she opened up, and it was so beautiful to see. I mentioned that I had the opportunity to talk to Gurdeep Pander, and Gurdeep was just such a joy, such a delight to talk to. He is a teacher, an author, a performer, and he moved to Canada only in 2006, so not super, super long ago, and officially became a Canadian citizen in 2011. He wanted to tour this country and be able to see everything that this country has to offer, all the beauty that it has to offer. And despite traveling and seeing lots of wonderful things, he made his home in the Yukon. One of the things that he was so delighted in was the snow and how it's so untouched and so fresh. And so getting to talk to him, someone who does not love snow, made me want to go outside and jump in a snow pile after speaking with him. He talks about building cross-cultural bridges and encouraging acceptance with everyone, and that inclusivity is something that he strives for. He wants everyone to experience the joy in the art of dancing and experience that love of music and art, whatever art that might be. His videos have gone on to inspire thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people worldwide. He's been able to touch a lot of hearts, and he's been doing some cross-country tours, stopping in at locations and just bringing people together. People in an office building that maybe don't connect as often, bringing them together to experience the beauty of Bhangra dance together. He's breaking down a lot of barriers, which is a really cool thing to see for someone who immigrated to our country. Something that a lot of our newcomer families and newcomer students in our schools might be able to jive with and relate to him on. Last but not least, this is Dimitri. Their stage name is Kiara, and getting to speak to Dimitri as a fan, but now as a friend, was something that was just so inspiring to me. I respect pronouns and I respect the use of them, and Dimitri introduced themselves by saying, you can use whatever pronoun you'd like as long as it's respectful. And that I thought was such a beautiful statement because I wasn't sure where to go. I didn't know how to ask at that time. What should I call you? It doesn't hurt to ask someone that question, but Dimitri laid it out for me. Dimitri also goes by their boy name or their drag name. So if you hear me go in between both or any pronouns, that's why. I've gotten used to that kind of mix and mingle of their identity. The conversation that was had with Dimitri was done in French. And because I'm not a native French speaker, my director at the time, Lise, conducted the interview, and I had the opportunity to listen in and listen to Dimitri talk about their struggle as someone who grew up not knowing so much about themselves and only later in life learning more. As a biracial Canadian, having a Quebecois mother, a Black father, um, the struggle of being too Black for his white friends, too white for his Black friends, too gay for his straight friends, and too femme for some queer communities that they reside in. Their identity felt lost. And so getting to talk to this person about that struggle, but in with all the other intersections that that struggle of identity crosses, it's just amazing that they've persevered and come through the other side, knowing so much about themselves and being so confident in who they are. Having the ability to see this person grow and become such a star in all of the facets and all of the ways that they are a star was a really inspiring part of this process for me. As someone who is a cisgendered heterosexual woman, getting to speak to someone about their identity made me really think about my own identity and the intersections that make up who I am. And so I am so grateful to Dimitri for letting me spend some time with them during this process. Now, I went through a very large vetting process when I thought about which Canadians do I want to talk to. My ideal was talk to one a day. I want to film videos with one person every day about these things. But as I began to learn more and more about how this type of process runs and the budget that it takes to create some videos, I realized I had to narrow it down. So I narrowed it down to these three. And I chose these three because I thought our students in our schools can see themselves in these individuals in some way. Kids that might want to be an athlete are going to jive with Dawn. Kids that have moved to this country are going to connect with Gurdeep. Students who are exploring and finding out who they are going to jive with Dimitri. All of these individuals are not teachers. And we hear from teachers all the time, or students hear from teachers all the time. So I wanted students to be able to look to other people in society that they don't know quite well, but through this process will hopefully get to know a little bit better and see versions of themselves within them. Being in Canada means French is our second language, or one of the official languages. I shouldn't say second because in some parts of the country, English is the second language. But we have two official languages here in Canada, English and French. And so at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, everything that's done is done in both official languages. And so for this resource that was created for teachers, there's an English version and there's a French version. Going through the process of creating this resource was very interesting, even looking at language, because it showed me the accessibility piece, that accessibility that's so important at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights, and the ability to have students participate in another language was something that was top of mind as we were creating these things. But also as we think about things like definitions, we think about the way that we know things to be, they might be translated a little bit differently. So taking time with our communications team to figure out, how do we say this in French? How is this worded in another language? So we can make sure that all of these themes that we're talking about are addressed with our students. In this program, I wanted to explore some difficult themes, and this is the table of contents that you'll find within the resource. The very first lesson is all about creating a safe space. You truly cannot have these difficult conversations without ensuring that the space that you're in is safe for all. And so whether you start with lesson 5, bias, lesson 7, allyship, it's imperative that you start by creating a safe space. And so a lesson was created on how to do so. The second lesson is called Let's Talk About Racism. We got to know what racism is so then we can learn how to be anti-racist, which is lesson 3. Microaggressions is probably the most difficult of all the lessons that are there because there's a lot of guilt that we feel about microaggressions. things that we've grown up hearing that maybe we didn't realize were microaggressions, we didn't realize were bad, are, brings a lot of guilt on for people. We learn about bias and how everybody has bias, and that's okay. We talk a little bit about intersectionality and acceptance in lesson number 6, and lesson number 7 is kind of our bright light about allyship. How can we be an ally to equity-deserving groups? There's 2 different inquiry-based projects for students that they can embark on after all of their learning. And in this whole teacher's guide, what was created as well was a letter from me. So the author's note at the beginning, giving teachers that grace that I mentioned a little bit earlier. Because sometimes we need to give each other grace. We need to tell one another it's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to learn. It's okay to stumble alongside of our students. So that author's note is that letter from me to you as a teacher. There's also a letter to parents, because there are some parents that, let's face it, are going to be a little bit heated about why we're suddenly switching gears and talking about this. My family's not racist. We don't need to do this. My kid's not a racist. We don't need to talk about this. Well, yes, we do, because we're not calling anyone anything. We're setting our students up to be able to help one another in the future. There's also a glossary that's included that outlines some of these terms. And so for teachers that maybe don't know what microaggressions are, that's okay. I'm not expecting that someone will go into this program an expert. So if anyone needs support with those definitions or with what some of those words mean, they've all been outlined for you in a glossary. I don't expect that you use this as a one and done, and at the end of this, you're suddenly not an anti-racist. I mean, you're suddenly not a racist and you are anti-racist. Can you tell I'm nervous? I think that it's important that we know that these lessons, these conversations should be more than just a 30-minute language arts block. You should be taking more than just 20 minutes here, 10 minutes there. Okay, great. We know everything there is to know about racism. Let's move on to math. I think it's important that these are jumping off points and they aren't one and done, end all be all situations. These are meant to springboard conversations in your classrooms and help students learn a little bit more. In this program, I came up with a main message and some secondary messaging that is really important that I think students need to be aware of right from the beginning. So the main message is that we all have a role to play in creating an anti-racist society. That's not the job of equity-deserving people to create an anti-racist society and hope everyone catches up. It's everyone's job, especially those of us with the privilege of being educators, the privilege of being people that can spread a message and support learning, to begin that journey with students. Unfortunately, not all students have a home or a place where they can learn about these things openly with their parents. And I'd say that's very few and far between, but we know that that's not every child's reality. So providing our classrooms as a safe space for them to begin that learning is so, so important. And I think it's something that we all need to take ownership of. The secondary messages, there are 4 of them, is the first one, we all have an identity made up of multiple entities. So I really thought about that in my conversation with Kiara. Not only am I a Black woman, I'm many other things. And scrap that. Not only am I a woman, I am many other things. Not only am I Black, I am many other things. Not only am I a teacher, the list goes on and on. So there's so many different things that make up who we are. And it's important that we recognize and accept that in everyone we meet. The secondary message is that people have their own lived experiences and should be given the space to talk about their story. I just told you a little bit about each of those 3 people, but that's not enough. To hear their stories from their mouths makes a world of difference in my understanding of their point of view when it comes to allyship, when it comes to intersectionality, when it comes to racism, and maybe some of the things that they've faced in their lifetime. Acceptance and allyship are key elements of anti-racism. Finding out not only how to be an ally, but how to be a co-conspirator and how to support one another silently. Allyship doesn't need to be loud. Allyship doesn't need to be, changing your entire Instagram profile to fit something. Allyship can simply be asking someone if they need your support. An ally is not someone who claims it, it's someone that is recognized by a group of people. So being able to support one another and accept one another for who we are, that's a key element of being an anti-racist and someone who's just inclusive of all. Last but not least, we all have the ability to learn and unlearn about microaggressions and bias. Growing up, I heard Black people are great at basketball. All Black people are good at basketball. Sure, a lot of Black people are good at basketball. But for someone that maybe isn't and is Black, that suddenly makes them feel like they're less than their counterparts, their peers, people within their group. And so unlearning some of those sentences and those sentiments are things that we can do to begin that anti-racist journey. And it is a journey. It's step by step, and it's not an overnight process. We're going to get it wrong, and that's totally okay. This is just a sample of what one of the lessons looks like. As you can see, it wasn't quite done when I had taken the screenshot, because here it says link to YouTube videos, but they're done. So in the actual teacher's guide, you will find all the links, all the resources that you need. Every lesson has an objective and a summary. There's activities for you to connect with your students on, and an opportunity to reflect. I think one of the most important things that we can do for our students is give them that think time, that wait time, that reflection time. There's also some driving questions. So if you're thinking, how can I prompt them? What can I do? There's going to be some questions that you can ask students as well. On the website, which I will show you at the very end, there are questions from these three individuals, from their mouths, that they want students to reflect on and answer and talk to each other about. And I will throw the link in the chat as well, so you have the opportunity to access it after this is all done. So we're going to take a moment, and I'd love to show you one of the videos. I'd love to show you Gurdeep's video. It's a beautiful way of talking about inclusion and joy and how to help one another in our world when it comes to racism. So let's meet Gurdeep.
I talk about inclusivity a lot. I tell people that, hey, inclusivity is part of creating happiness. My name is Gurdeep Pandey. I'm an artist. I create dances. I live in the wilderness of the Yukon. This is my playground. I was born in a village. The name of that village is Siad, which is in Punjab. Coming from that place to Canada, and specifically to the Yukon, it was a big change for me. Everything was new for me. My personal connection with racism has been always there. I have seen people making jokes around my turban, people approaching me and saying bad things to me just because I look different. When people live these kind of experiences, it's huge. It can change their whole life. It can impact their whole family. It creates suffering. And one suffering leads to more sufferings. Then there's no happiness in the community. It starts from childhood. Whatever type of comfort we have created in our life, we start to support that kind of comfort, and everything else feels threatening, feels kind of odd or weird to us. As soon as you see someone who look different than yourself, either you are not going to connect with them, you will have some biases, you have some attitudes towards those people, like attitudes of discrimination or racism. This is very important for people to connect with people who look different. Once we start knowing other people, We learn that, hey, my smiles, my hopes, my dreams, even my fears, they are similar. That person has same kind of dreams, same kind of hopes, same kind of smiles, and even same kind of fears. Sometimes people want to learn about other people, they don't get chance actually, because their walls around them, they are so big, and they are so fearful actually going out of those walls. But once you grow up, learning about those people, knowing about people, and then your mind will be crystal clear. How we can create awareness, how we can achieve it? We need to create spaces on a regular basis. That spaces could be beyond school, beyond work, where people learn about different cultures, different backgrounds, different histories. When we have more spaces like this, I think we can create a revolution. If you are from a different culture, or you have a different lifestyle, the one experience is similar, that you received hate, and then you're part of the similar community. And when you are part of the community, what you need to do, you become allies. You should support each other. Then it's your duty. If I'm 10-year-old Gurdeep, how I would tell about myself about racism? In a nutshell, I would say that if you have hate towards other people inside your heart, that hate will also not let you live a peaceful life. But with these spaces where you get chances to learn about people, then true humanity comes out, which would benefit everyone, which will benefit the whole world, and which will create a lot of joy, hope, and positivity.
So I wasn't lying when I said he's truly that kind and he's truly that smiley all the time. Just waking up and seeing a text from Gurdeep saying, I hope you have a wonderful day, Sarah, is just the icing on life's cake, I think. So that's one of the videos that I was able to film, and I'm just so proud of this project and what it's come to be. I've put a link in the chat for you to access the resource, to access the website. At the very end, there will be a QR code that you can scan to access it as well. But if you'd like to take a peek now while I'm chatting, it's in the chat there for you. Now, this last portion of our time together, I have some questions for you, and I would love for you to utilize the chat to answer some of the questions that I have. And some of you I recognize. I took a peek at who's here, and there's so many wonderful people here, people that I've known for years and years, people that I've met through social media. So I thank you very much for being here. And the context that this is in is obviously for a K-12 classroom setting, but if you're not an educator, I want you to think about these questions in the context of the profession that you have. So you might not be a teacher, but how can you utilize these questions in your own workspace? So I would love to see in the chat some answers to a few of these questions if you are able to do so. The first question that I have is, where are you at in your journey with anti-racism? I can fully admit that I'm still learning. And holding a role where I get the opportunity to learn is really, really cool. And I recognize some people that are here also might be in similar roles. They might be experts themselves, but where are you at? So I'll give you a moment to throw an answer in the chat if you are comfortable doing so. The word learning comes up, and I love that you said that, because even an expert, I feel, can learn something. And I struggle with the word expert because that means you know everything there is to know about everything related to that topic. And this topic is so big. It's ever changing, it's ever growing. And so the ability to continue to learn is something that I feel so privileged to be able to do in the role that I hold right now. My next question for you is, what are some things you can do in your school community to be anti-racist? Um, oh, that's beautiful, Denise. Thanks for sharing. You might not be a teacher, like I mentioned. You might be in a different profession, but what are some things that you can do, just period, in your community to be anti-racist? It could involve a lot of different things. It could involve the students. It could involve other adults. So again, I'll give you a moment to throw an answer in the chat if you wouldn't mind. My third question is, it's a bit loaded, but I think it's an important one for us to reflect on, especially as educators. How can you best support others on their own journey when teaching about microaggression, bias, diversity, anti-racism? What's the best way to support other people in their learning? If you're someone who's privileged enough to have some background, or like was stated earlier, is still learning, how can you support others on their own journey? This is a beautiful comment that you've left. Thank you. Address things as they happen. That's so huge. Um, I mentioned earlier, I taught grades 3 through 6 for 8 years, and it, thankfully, young children won't let you move on until the things have been dealt with. So I find, as a sixth grade teacher, where I ended my teaching career, if something happened, we were on it. There was a class meeting. We talked about it as soon as it happened, whether it had to do with language, inclusivity, making sure people felt welcome. We address things as they happen so they can't fester, they can't grow, they can't get worse. And I was lucky to truly, in my time as a teacher, work with just amazing students. And I mean, 10 out of 10 for all 8 years. I was so, so blessed. And addressing things as they happen was kind of our saving grace when it came to dealing with difficult things, difficult conversations, like things related to diversity or bias or microaggressions. Talking about them as they happen. Denise, I think you've got it bang on. My last question for you is related to allyship. So I have the word marginalized groups there. I'm learning that I want to change that language to equity deserving groups. So, how can someone be a better ally to equity deserving groups? And that doesn't necessarily have to be based on race, that could be based on gender, that could be based on, oh gosh, a myriad of things. But how can you be a better ally to people? This is such a great group of people. Listen and stop talking. Yes, I think that's so important. And I'm going to follow that up with active listening. That's so important to just listen and not interject when someone is telling you something. And learning, for a lot of people, unfortunately, empathy is not a skill that is always taught. And so learning what it means to be empathetic and how to show that to people who are struggling. Meet people where they're at, break bread with them. Oh my gosh, in the Black community, food is everything. And I'm sure it's everything to everyone. But speaking from my own lived experience, even tough conversations can be done over a meal. That fellowship, that gathering, bringing people together is a wonderful way to continue to support people. Going to bat for people who may not look like you. Oh my gosh, 1,000%. Going to bat for people, like I said, doesn't necessarily need to be the Instagram takeover of suddenly I'm going to show you that I'm the biggest supporter of this thing or this group or these people. You can do that quietly, showing up for people. The way that you folks have shown up today is a wonderful way to show that you're an ally and that you're learning and seeking that knowledge to be able to continue this journey. Acknowledging privilege, yes. We know, I'll back that up. I won't speak for everyone. I'll speak for myself. I have privilege, and I know that I do in some realms of my life, not in every realm, but as an educator, as someone with a voice, I do have privilege. And so to be able to use that privilege to support people, to support others, to support students, teachers, all of us, that's a huge one. Intentional learning, absolutely. All learning is important, but encouraging that intentional learning and understanding of, of ourselves, if we're thinking about who we are as people, but then thinking about the greater community, the people that are in front of us, encouraging that as we go forth in this world. I feel like you folks have nailed it on the head, and I'm so pleased that you've taken some time to engage in this portion with me. So thank you very much for that active participation in the chat. Now, I mentioned at the top of the hour that I have till 3:30, but this won't take till 3:30. This is one of my very last slides. The takeaway that I have for you is the resource itself with all of the translated things that you will need, the videos that have closed captioning and sign language translation so that all of your students can partake. If you want to scan that QR code, it'll take you right to the resource. I also threw in the chat the link, and the website is humanrights.ca/ pass the mic. Let's talk about racism with a dash in between all of those. I'll put it in the chat once more. And if you'd like to utilize it, I would love to hear about how you decide to use this resource in your class. You might decide, I'm going to do every single lesson that there is and the inquiry-based projects. Or you might say, you know what, my class is really just struggling with acceptance. So I'm going to do lesson 6 and that's it. I would love to hear how you use this. And I would love to know the impact, or if it has impact, or where I can improve as a creator of this resource when I'm talking about it. This resource was created over the span of 2 years. And in my new role, which is only 3 months old, I'm already seeing things in this resource that I would like to change. For example, the word marginalized. Like I said, I want to pull that, and I want the newer edition to have equity deserving, not marginalized. There's a connotation that comes with those different words. And so I'm seeing things that could be edited and spliced and diced. I would love to hear from your point of view, what you like, what you don't like, what could change about the resource. So with all of that being said, I want to take one more opportunity to say thank you. I am so grateful that you're here. I recognize that it's middle of the day on Saturday and you could be doing literally anything else, but you took some time to listen to me talk about my baby, this program that I just am so enthralled and proud of. And it means a lot that you took some time with me today. Some of you are not even in Edmonton, Alberta. You're across the world taking part in this conversation. So for that, I thank you so, so much. I hope that you will continue to extend your learning over these next few days. This convention is completely free right now, especially for teachers. And one of my mottos that I always used to say in my classroom is, if it's free, it's for me. So I hope you will also take part in all of these free sessions that are happening. Then some of them you can take part with your students. Each day is themed, so I encourage you to go to the website, to the John Humphrey Center, and to figure out what could I spend some time with my 8th graders or my 7th graders or my 9th graders, my kindergartners. Where can we do some more learning as a group? Thank you so much to the staff of the John Humphrey Center for the invitation to present today. It's been such a joy and such a treat. And I will leave you with my email address. So if you have any questions, any concerns, if we're not connected already via social media or email, feel free to jot that down or take a screenshot and reach out if you need anything at all. With that being said, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a great rest of your day and take good care. Happy holidays, everyone.